How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. Everyone's having a lovely day. So, the Buckeyes go out, they sign or hire, reportedly still, the report finalizing a deal, Matt Patricia, defensive coordinator for the future for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Could be a good signing. We'll see. And the reason we say this is because I was, diving into it, looking into it. I was like, how did this guy do with New England? Because he did go out the door eventually. How good was New England's defenses before he left? And, the thing that came up that I noticed very quickly was in the Tom Brady era, the New England Patriots always, virtually every season, had top 10 defense. There was, I want to say one or two they didn't. Every single Super Bowl had a top 10 defense. Every single one of them. Every single Super Bowl win came with a top 10 defense. 2 of the 3 Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl wins came with a top 10 scoring defense. We just watched Patrick Mahomes look like he was a 3rd grader playing in the NFL last Sunday against a dominant defense that could get home with 4 guys in, not blitzing. All of that important because we know with the Bengals, there is all this talk of keeping T, keeping Jamar, keeping Joe Burrow, and the keeping Joe Burrow happy is, for me, that's a whole different story. I would need Joe Burrow's blessing. I would need his understanding. I would need him to be able to look around. I need him to understand he has a say before you do anything too wild. But I also, as a logical thinker, when it tries to do my best to remove the emotion, it's hard to let players go that you like. It's hard to, it's just like the long ball in baseball. Sure, it's cool getting base hits, but you just don't get that same adrenaline rush, that same excitement as a guy that hits 50 home runs, as a guy that gets 200 base hits. It's the same with football. You just don't get that same hit, that same adrenaline rush when your team methodically moves down the field 5 yards here, 4 yards here, 5 yards on the ground, 4 yards around, as you do with that quick hitter, 25 yards down the field, 75 yards down the field, touchdown passes from your quarterback. It's just not the same. And it can be the same as defense. It's not as exciting when your defense holds a team to 10 points and you score 20 as it is. You win 38-35. It just isn't. Of course, that emotion's tied there. Of course, that thought process is there that, hey, you got to keep these guys. You got to keep both of them. It's the only way the Bengals can win. And just looking back, all of this kept in mind before we go into this, because I know it's going to upset a lot of people. A Bengals fan. If you're not a Bengals fan, watch the video. I appreciate you. I don't know what possessed you to want to watch me. I appreciate it though. I'll just be rambling about some annoying stuff sometimes if you're not a Bengals fan, but I still appreciate you coming around. Looking back, just keeping that in mind, I want to see the Bengals win as many Super Bowls as possible, just as much as any other fan does. The way we get there, we all kind of have different routes, and that's okay. But looking at this as logically as possible, I've dug back the last 15 Super Bowl winners. So the modern era of football, obviously you can't look back in the 80s and the 90s, it was a different game, but the last 15 years, lot of the same. A lot of the same recipe to success. In the last 15 years, there's been 2 teams that have won a Super Bowl with 2 1,000-yard pass catchers on that team. Only 2. Mind you, because that's what the Bengals want, right? That's what the fans want. That's what Joe Burrow wants. Is you want 2 1,000-yard pass catchers on your team. And now here's the kicker. One of them was with Peyton Manning. Remember Emmanuel Sanders? I was thinking Julius Thomas, Demarius Thomas. Elite. Oh, was it elite? Was that team elite? Defense, offense. But you know what happened? Old Peyton took a pay cut to make that happen. The other year, the New York Giants, Hakeem Nicks, Victor Cruz, Eli Manning went off that season with those guys. 9-7 on the season. Remember, they got hot late. One of those Giants runs where they still went in there and somehow find a way to beat the Patriots in shocking fashion. Those 2 wide receivers were on rookie draft deals, getting paid $1 million to play a year. In other words, in 15 years, there has been zero precedents, 0 times it's happened where a team has won the Super Bowl and paid their 2 1,000-yard receivers and their top quarterback market value and won a Super Bowl. What's crazy is what people forget, even when Tom Brady was at his peak, at his prime, had all of these weapons around him, wasn't winning Super Bowls. Sure, he had good players and they weren't putting up gaudy numbers, but there was so many years. All of them, actually. Let's dive into it. There has never been a year where Tom Brady has had two 1,000-yard receivers, whether that be including Gronk, not including. There's never been a time where he has had two and he has won a Super Bowl. It's happened multiple times where he's had none. 0-1. Imagine that. The regarded GOAT of the NFL won multiple Super Bowls with 0 1,000-yard pass catchers. Never with 2. Again, dominant in the trenches, good defense, and you pair that with an elite quarterback that brings the players up around you. That has been the recipe for success. 5 times. It's more importantly, 5 times in the last 15 years. A team has won, that's 33% by the way, a team has won a Super Bowl with 0 1,000-yard pass catchers. 5 times. Keep that in mind. 5 times. And as Bengals fans and as Joe Burrow, I can't slander my quarterback like that, but as Joe Burrow, for some reason, why do we think the Bengals are going to be different? Why is this time different? In 15 years, no other team has been able to do this. I think part of the reason we think it's different is because we see Joe Burrow getting killed and took this team to a Super Bowl, and he was half a second away from winning a Super Bowl with what he had. Even then, you call that top 10 defense. Remember, Evan McPherson and that defense really got them to that Super Bowl. Joe Burrow made the plays when he needed to, but the defense kept him in those games. It wasn't 2 elite wide receivers, Bengals putting up 30 points a game. No, that's not how they got there. So even the Bengals and their president has proven that. You know, the reason you look at Patrick Mahomes, the only teams that have stopped him from winning a Super Bowl are teams that have not outscored him. It was teams that found a way to stop him on defense. The Eagles stopped him on defense. Besides Tom Brady, again, the exception of the rule. Even they put pressure on Patrick Mahomes, made him look lost in the Super Bowl. Bengals beat him. You know, the Bengals, when he was on them streaks, it was rushing 3, dropping 8. Mahomes didn't know what to do. He couldn't move the football down the field. Bengals kept keeping him scoreless in the second half. The defense got him back in the game. Doesn't matter how many receivers they have. That's not going to stop Patrick Mahomes. But you know what happens? Peyton Manning, Denver Broncos, go up against, again, Legion of Boom, all the weapons in the world. What's the worst that can happen? You can't lose. I don't care how good that defense is. And then what happens? You get humbled. Drew Brees, I hear some talk. Hey, Bengals can load up on offense because if their defense is going to struggle, they have to outscore teams. Hey, how'd that work for Drew Brees? They won 1 Super Bowl under Drew Brees. Oh, by the way, top 10 defense. Besides that, they didn't have a chance ever. They never had good defenses, and Drew Brees was forced to outscore them every game. They loaded up on offense. They paid their guys on offense. They couldn't draft defensively. They couldn't sign guys defensively. They couldn't put things together defensively. Nothing happened. So I ask people, what is different? Do I think the Bengals under this formula could find a way to win 1 Super Bowl? Absolutely. Because Joe Burrow is that guy. And this is something I always try to remind people of. Think about this. I just gave you all the stats, all the facts, all the proof in the pudding about what you need to win a Super Bowl. All those teams come with dominant trenches. The Bengals went to a Super Bowl without dominant trenches and still nearly won it because that was how good Joe Burrow was under duress. We have to remember, I think I've seen a stat, it was like 48% pressure rate on Patrick Mahomes, and Burrow was at 47 when he put up 400 yards earlier this season against, was it Baltimore? That shows you how good he is compared to every other quarterback under pressure. But you can't build a team off that and say, hey, we just won't ever build a good stout offensive line because your quarterback will be injured at 30 and he won't be playing by 32 and you'll have a franchise quarterback for 3 years. And that's where I say, sure, you keep that formula. And maybe Joe will win you one. Maybe Joe won't be with the team in 5 years too, though. And maybe he won't win you one because maybe what will happen, you will be seconds short of a Super Bowl win because you could not protect the quarterback. If Joe Burrow was behind that Eagles offensive line, if he was behind that Chiefs offensive line, if Joe Burrow was on either one of these teams in the Super Bowl, you could not convince me otherwise that he would have won that Super Bowl. Because the teams around them were built for an elite quarterback to win Super Bowls. Dominate the trenches, protect the passer, make some plays defensively. Burrow would have found a way. That's how special I think Joe Burrow is. I think Joe Burrow is the Tom Brady of this era. And if you think Joe Burrow's the Tom Brady of this era, you give him Julian Edelman, you give him a Gronk-esque type of guy. You know, he doesn't need multiple guys, though. If Jamar's is Gronk, then Jamar's is Gronk. Then you worry about protecting him, because if you give him time to step back and pass, Joseph will have 700 receiving yards. You bring in a guy like Jermaine Burton in the third round. I know Jermaine's not the guy now, but I mean, you can bring in a guy in the third round. He'll get 600 to 800 receiving yards under Joe Burrow with time. Joe Burrow will find a way to move football down the field. And not to mention, now all of a sudden you're pass blocking. You hand that ball to Chase Brown, who's looking really freaking good. 4 or 5 yards of carry. Now you got a 1,300 rusher. Your defense can stay off the field more. They get time to rest up. They get time to play great football. Oh, wow. I'm trying to look at every angle of how this can work for the Bengals. And just, again, historically, that is not how Super Bowls are won. And I can't imagine an area where the Bengals can keep all three of these guys at market value. Sure, again, you could possibly draft a T. Higgins, preferably in the second or third round, and make it happen. Sure. On a draft contract, you know, you got to have cheap players somewhere. You're not going to keep both of these guys and then fix the trenches, now fix the secondary. Jermaine once gone. You're still worried about the safety position. You're still worried about your guards position. There's a lot of holes. You ain't filling all that in the draft. And you're sure as heck not going to fill it in free agency if you sign these guys and keep cutting players left and right, because you're going to have to fill those voids too. You're always going to be pressed against the cap. I know people say, well, the cap goes up, it goes up, it goes up. That's right. But a $10 million, remember, and this is the thing, remember what the Bengals are paying for some of these guards, for some of these tackles. You know, an $8 million guard 3 years ago is now going to go for 10. Like, go for 11. Every position's cap goes up. So the cap going up's not really, the only thing the cap going up is beneficial to is if you sign a quarterback to, you know, an 8-9 year contract. Even the quarterback position in general, really, because it just inflates so much faster than the rest of the league's position because how important it is. But I'm just trying to find a way to justify the Bengals being successful this way, because I don't want to see the Bengals not win, but I do think the Bengals are going about it the right way. If they just could have gotten something for T. Higgins, if they could have tagged and traded him, hindsight's 2020, but you tag and trade him, you bring in, imagine tagging and trading him, you bring in a second round pick, you get a dominant pass rusher or something, and all of a sudden what that defense looks like this season. Because we can say with confidence, we've seen Joe Burrow move the football up and down the field with only one of these guys. The problem the Bengals have is you're asking, this is where I think things get twisted before we go here. You're asking Joe Burrow to get rid of the football like that, under pressure, under duress, quickly, very, very quickly, because you can't protect him. Because of that, you do need plus receivers. You do need those plus matchups to quickly get rid of the football because they don't have time to get open. But if you give your quarterback time to throw the football, not only do you not need 2 elite wide receivers, but now all of a sudden your wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 3, your wide receiver 4 have time also to get open. Now all of a sudden you give Joe Burrow time to throw the football, and you have more to worry about than just Jamar Chase on the field or just T. Higgins on the field. You can't, and we've seen them change it up this year, but you can't just play that double coverage, that double bracket on those two guys, because now all of a sudden Joe Burrow has time to go through his progressions and find the open man. That was a problem that stagnated this defense under Callahan, was you could bracket your 2 out guys out wide, and of course Joe's going to look their way still, kind of find, to see what's there, but by the time he goes through his progressions, by the time he gives number 3, number 4 on the team time to get open, there's a guy in his face. Protect him, you give him another second for those guys to get open, and all of a sudden he's looking like he's spreading that football around to everybody, and everybody looks unstoppable. But Joe Burrow is going to bring the guys up around him. We have seen this, and this is the thing to remember. We've seen this every single year at the tight end position. There hasn't been a tight end that's come in and looked worse than they did before they was in Cincinnati. They all come in, get a payday, and walk out the door. Remember that. That's what you got with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow needs a plus wide receiver, maybe throw him a plus tight end. It doesn't need to be top 5. And then you need to protect him, and you need to win in the trenches, and you will win. Promise you. I promise. If the Bengals put together a top 10 defense and a top 10 offensive line, I promise you, Bengals win at least 3 under Joe Burrow. Personal thoughts. So nonetheless, love y'all's thoughts. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.